Good day. My name is Egon Chalakian. As you may know, the Russian media have already branded me the harbinger of the apocalypse. But now they've decided to leap from biblical prophecy straight into technological future. Because in their latest report, they've declared me a deep fake. So by their logic, I am now a virtual harbinger of the apocalypse. Whether I'm virtual or not, I'll let them debate that. It's beside the point. What matters is that the threats I speak of are absolutely very much real. Today, I will explain to you just who benefits and why from the eruption of the Siberian magma plume actually taking place. The Siberian magma plume is a colossal stream of molten magma that triggered the Great Permian extinction 250 million years ago. Now it's rising again, threatening another planetary scale catastrophe, no less devastating than the last. Who would benefit from the destruction of half the world? Yes, you heard me right. There are those who not only turn a blind eye to the threat, but actively work to ensure it happens. And believe me, the reasons will surprise you. By the end of this address, you'll understand just how it's all connected. However, for the moment, let's just start at the beginning with the disinformation which has been visited upon the Russian public. The claim by Russian media that I am a deepfake is so absurd it would be laughable if it weren't part of a larger, coordinated effort to mislead you directly. I want to show you a few excerpts from the segment they aired.
However, that's not all, since deepfakes, as it turns out, are even being used to proclaim the end of the world. You may have come across this figure somewhere on YouTube or TikTok. He's referred to variously as an American physicist, a White House lobbyist, or even an intelligence expert. In short, it's total nonsense. But Radovka has already connected the dots, reporting that Egon Chalakian doesn't actually exist, and that his virtual persona was created by Ukrainian cultists.
The investigation revealed there is no person matching the biography of the Doctor of Science. Experts call the deepfake created by the cultists one of the most sophisticated digital manipulations in history.
Overall, the character is Russophobic, yet strangely mysterious.
Think about it. At this very moment, this kind of nonsense is being spread at the very moment when you, Russian citizens, are witnessing alarming changes with your own eyes. Natural anomalies across your territory are intensifying. Disasters are becoming more frequent. You could have been given the facts. You could have been told the real cause, namely the Siberian magma plume, which at any moment could unleash its destructive force. But instead, they feed you, well, this contrived garbage. In the past, I might have simply laughed off such absurdity and moved on, but not today. Not when the cost of such deception is measured not in reputation but in the very future of humanity. Not today, when the Siberian magma plume could erupt at any moment. Just imagine it. A colossal stream of molten magma right now rising from deep within the earth toward the surface beneath Siberia. Earlier, I presented detailed and irrefutable scientific data proving that the Siberian plume is already showing signs of activity. If it breaks through, its eruption will annihilate not only Russia, but all of Eurasia. All the consequences of such an event would reverberate catastrophically across the entire globe. Now, when informing Russian citizens and the global public, it is more vital than ever. When we have so little time left to prevent this catastrophe, they choose to mislead the public. This isn't just foolishness, it is a crime. We don't have time for these games. We have one goal: to save as many lives as possible and stop this threat. People of Russia, please understand this. These broadcasts are not being produced by accident. Their goal is to discredit scientific data and manipulate you into dismissing the very real threat of a Siberian magma plume eruption. This isn't simply a harmless joke. It's a deliberate attempt to silence the facts, to bury the truth, and to leave you without a chance at survival. They want you to sit quietly until the very end, until your entire country, along with you and your children, is simply suddenly blown off the map. And now I speak directly to the journalist who devised this and other similar broadcasts. Tell me, do you think you're immortal? Do you believe the magma will somehow pass you by? A rational person, when confronted with a threat of this magnitude, shares the information and looks for a solution. So why then are you so determined to silence the truth? Don't you have families of your own? Don't you have children? Your families live on the same continent where the plume is located. Your children breathe the same air that at any moment could be filled with scalding ash. So tell me, those of you who lie openly on television, claiming that the threat doesn't exist, are you really that detached from reality? Do you actually hate your fellow citizens and your own families so much that you're willing to destroy your own country? Why is it that I, an American, am the only one speaking the truth to protect your elderly, your adults, and your children? Why aren't you, the representatives of the Russian media, doing it yourselves? That is your direct responsibility. And yet, instead of fulfilling that duty, you lie. You intentionally misinform the public. So tell me, who is giving you the orders to spread this falsehood? This brings us to the critical point. While an enormous amount of money and resources is being poured into your disinformation campaigns in Russia, the real threat has not gone away. In the report on the threat of a magma plume eruption in Siberia and strategies for addressing the issue, scientists from ALLATRA presented a vast body of evidence demonstrating the current influence of the Siberian magma plume on the Earth's crust in that region. This, of course, comes from the very organization that your government so conveniently declared undesirable in your country. From video to video, I've shown you example after example of just how the media attempts to suppress this information. To do so, they often attempt to invoke the opinions of scientists, such as the statement made by Yuri Vinogradov, director of the Geophysical Survey of the Russian Academy of Sciences, which I addressed in my previous video. As everyone has now seen for themselves, his so-called expert assessment, which aimed to convince you that there is no threat, is nothing more than nonsense. It is not grounded in any scientific data whatsoever. Quite candidly, it is an embarrassment to the Russian Academy of Sciences. Regardless, what I'm about to share with you is of critical importance. If this information reaches the public at large, it has the power to change the course of events. And if enough people know it, it will help break through the wall of silence. Accordingly, please set aside whatever you're doing right now and listen closely. This concerns the life of every single one of you. The increasingly active magma plume beneath Siberia, an area comparable in size to the entire continent of Australia, constitutes a genuine planetary threat, and it will not disappear in its own accordance. As a global civilization, we must urgently address this problem through controlled degassing. This means gradually releasing and redirecting gas and lava from within the Earth to relieve internal pressure, and thus prevent a catastrophic eruption. It is the only viable way to avert disaster and save billions of lives. Without immediate action, we are headed toward the collapse of civilization. Anyway, now let me demonstrate through a simple example why the Siberian plume poses a mortal danger not only to the people of Siberia, but to all of humanity, and how the proposed solution could stop the impending catastrophe. I'll explain it in terms so simple that even a small child could understand. What you see on the screen is a blue balloon symbolically representing our Earth. You also see a pump inflating the balloon. This represents the influx of external cosmic influence into Earth's core. This external influence heats the core, which in turn melts the mantle. Hot magma rises from the depths and expands in volume. You can see how the balloon grows larger and inflates with the added air. The internal pressure pushing outward increases. This illustrates magma expanding within the planet as a result of additional heat input. Next, you see a specific point on the balloon being pierced by an IV tube system. This serves as a figurative analogy for the simultaneous drilling of hundreds of boreholes across the Siberian region to release excess gas and lava. And next, you see the roller flow regulator being opened, and the air begins to escape from the balloon. You can tell because the feather hanging near the balloon starts to flutter. This is the release of pressure from the system. The opening of the roller regulator symbolizes the process of planned degassing of the Siberian magma plume, during which excess gas and lava are diverted, and pressure within the system decreases. The balloon stops expanding rapidly, no matter how much new air is pumped in. So what is actually happening at this moment? Right now, since planned degassing has not been implemented, the excess magma remains trapped in a closed system. As a result, the Earth's crust begins to crack. This is the increase in seismic activity, and it will only continue to intensify. You can replicate this experiment at home. Coat a balloon with a sugar glaze. Once the glaze hardens, start inflating the balloon. You will see it begin to crack. This is a clear visual example of the growing number and strength of earthquakes. Pressure is continuously building up in the Earth's interior, which is precisely why seismic activity is now increasing exponentially. What does this tell us? That we are standing on the brink of massive catastrophes. Just look at what's happening around the world. Isn't it obvious? This is precisely what explains the recent powerful seismic event in Myanmar. According to seismologists, the March 28th earthquake in Myanmar, with a magnitude of 7.7, is an atypical super shear event. In this type of earthquake, energy is released at an extraordinary rate, dramatically amplifying its destructive potential. The super shear phenomenon is characterized by the rupture front moving faster than the seismic waves it generates. This creates a concentrated energy front capable of causing severe destruction over long distances. As experts vividly describe it, this kind of rupture is comparable to the supersonic jet stream of a fighter aircraft. Moving forward, we will see more and more of these abnormal shifts, atypical ruptures, subsidence and uplifts occurring across the globe, day by day. The sugar glaze on the surface of our balloon is beginning to crack at the seams. Right now, the volume of the balloon is slowly but steadily increasing. Pressure within the Earth's interior continues to build as the heat generated inside the planet expands the volume of magma. This in turn causes the planet's surface to expand. Suppose we fail to carry out planned degassing and do not relieve the continuously mounting pressure underground. In that case, the air pumped in by the inflator will eventually rupture the balloon. In geological terms, this would mean a rupture of the Earth's crust in the most affected zone. A rupture always occurs where the crust is thinnest. Today, there are two exceedingly thin points on the planet: the zone of magma plume beneath Siberia and the fragile crust in the area of the Mariana Trench. However, at this moment, the Siberian plume is the leading source of aggressive influence on the Earth's crust. Thus, this is the central premise of degassing: to relieve the critical pressure building within the system we call planet Earth. It is essential to understand that the process of pressure accumulation in Earth's system is not infinite. It resembles a pump inflating a balloon, which operates only for a limited time. The influx of additional energy into the Earth's core occurs only once every 12,000 years. We will address the duration of this period in more detail a bit later. For now, our primary objective is to preserve the integrity of the planet's outer shell, to prevent the bursting of the balloon during this peak pressure phase, which is a relatively brief period of time. We must endure this interval until the natural cessation of the active phase of external cosmic influence. The very existence of this external cosmic influence, an additional external energy directed toward the core of our Earth, no longer raises doubts. It is an established fact, confirmed by the activation of seismic and volcanic processes observed on other planets in the solar system, which throughout the entire period of observation prior to the beginning of this cycle were considered dead, lifeless masses of rock. However, with the onset of the current cycle, they have begun to awaken, exhibiting signs of geological activity. Anyway, when the anomalous heat release will subside, it will lead to the stabilization of magmatic processes and a reduction in the deformational impact to the Earth's crust. Overcoming this period is our paramount task. Under current conditions, the refusal to implement degassing could lead to a catastrophic scenario, one that would mark the end of human civilization. This is the very message I am striving to convey to you today. In summary, the controlled degassing of the Siberian magma plume represents humanity's path forward, our means of withstanding the present 12,000-year cycle of cataclysms. Let me now clarify a critical point that often causes confusion among some of my less informed interlocutors. Why degassing must be carried out specifically in the area of the Siberian plume rather than in Yellowstone region. The facts are as follows. The magma chambers beneath Yellowstone are approximately 1,000 times smaller in volume compared to the Siberian magma plume. This means that even a powerful supervolcano such as Yellowstone is minuscule when measured against the plume beneath Siberia. Consequently, artificial degassing in the Yellowstone area or in any other comparable supervolcano would have no appreciable effect on global geological processes. The scale is simply too insignificant in relation to the magnitude of the ongoing geodynamic activity. Furthermore, the eruption histories of Yellowstone and the Siberian plume also affirm that Yellowstone has never exerted the same level of influence on Earth as the Siberian plume. For instance, the Siberian traps formed by eruptions of the Siberian plume 250 million years ago triggered a global catastrophe, the Great Permian Extinction. Yellowstone, despite its formidable power, has never produced consequences of such magnitude. To reduce the excessive pressure accumulating in Earth's interior, a primary driver of escalating natural disasters, a large-scale and rigorously controlled degassing operation is absolutely required. Such an operation can be safely executed specifically in the region of the Siberian plume due to the presence of the Siberian traps. These traps are solidified lava flows that function like reinforcement bars, holding the Earth's crust in place. Because of this natural reinforcement, pressure can be gradually released without the risk of a catastrophic explosion or tectonic plate rupture. In contrast to Yellowstone, where the Earth's crust is structurally weaker, the presence of the traps in Siberia provides the necessary conditions for safely conducting such a high-intensity degassing effort. Moreover, it is the Siberian plume that poses an exceptional threat, as it is exhibiting signs of approaching a catastrophic eruption, one comparable to the event that occurred 250 million years ago. Humanity must hold out just 20 years until the active phase of the geodynamic cycle concludes, carrying out a deliberate, precise, and controlled decompression effort during this period. Thus, this is the only location on the planet where such interventions aimed at reducing pressure within the Earth's magmatic system can produce a significant effect. There are no alternative solutions. Our detailed calculations confirm that it is only at this specific site that humanity can implement the necessary measures to prevent a global catastrophe. A natural question thus arises: how can the planned degassing of the Siberian magma plume possibly influence the resolution of the 12,000-year cataclysm cycle, especially considering that this cycle encompasses the entire solar system? What significance could the systematic degassing of the Siberian magma plume have in alleviating pressure within the Earth system? At first glance, such a measure may appear inconsequential. You should note that there is an alternative approach to pressure relief: the creation of numerous localized decompression points in the Earth's crust above the Siberian magma plume. These would enable a gradual reduction of excess pressure. In practical terms, this would require a simultaneous release of pressure through a system of hundreds of boreholes, which would synchronously divert excess gas and lava. Importantly, these boreholes would not need to reach extreme depths, as the magma is already rising within the Earth's crust. Every day, hundreds of wells are drilled around the world for oil, gas, and water. This offers reason for optimism regarding the technical feasibility of drilling boreholes for controlled degassing of the Siberian magma plume. Planning the placement of boreholes for scheduled degassing would take no more than 6 months, and the process itself to initiate planned degassing may take only 1 year. The advantage of this degassing strategy lies in the controllability of the eruption process. The key aspect of this approach is the mitigation of critical internal pressure and the controlled release of ash, which would minimize atmospheric strain and eliminate the risk of volcanic winter. The implementation of controlled degassing of the Siberian magma plume significantly increases humanity's chances of survival during the cycle of catastrophes, compared to a scenario in which no planned controlled degassing is conducted. Otherwise, the planet will undergo this degassing on its own terms, but by then we will no longer exist on it. This is the fundamental issue that demands universal understanding. Our task is to endure the critical period of geodynamic instability while the Earth's core is subjected to external cosmic influence that delivers additional energy to it. This is the phase in our analogy when the balloon is gradually inflating from the gas pumped into it. Humanity must withstand this relatively brief interval of heightened danger. The peak interval of external cosmic influence, which occurs every 12,000 years, is in fact relatively brief. According to the analysis of geodynamic events, the onset of this interval was recorded around 1995. At present, we have entered the active phase of the cycle, which is expected to last approximately 20 years, and this is the period we must now endure. By 2036, as the timeline approaches the peak of the cycle's activity, catastrophes of critical intensity are projected. Provided that timely preparations are made and preventative measures are implemented, namely the planned degassing of the Siberian plume and the restoration of the ocean's heat-conducting function, then following the peak, the intensity of cataclysms is expected to begin to decline. It is anticipated that the subsequent stabilization period will require a comparable span of time. However, this phase will be marked by a gradual improvement, growing better with each passing year, unlike the current pattern of continuous deterioration, which likewise intensifies year after year. Undeniably, both processes, escalation and stabilization, are extended over time. The period during which our planet is affected by the geodynamic cycle of catastrophe spans approximately 80 years. This estimate is based on the analysis of previous catastrophic cycles, derived from research in the geochronology of quaternary deposits, ice cores, seafloor sediments, and paleosols, lava flows, ash layers, supervolcano, geomorphology, paleomagnetic data, and numerous other lines of evidence. In the context of geological processes, a time span of 80 years is an exceedingly brief interval. As humanity, we must persevere through the peak phase, the period when the threat of planetary rupture, the bursting of the balloon, is at its highest. This critical window lasts only 20 years, after which the existential risk of magmatic catastrophes will decline significantly. The most acute phase of catastrophic events is projected to occur between 2030 and 2040. In essence, humanity must survive a critical 20-year period. However, given the exponential trajectory of escalating cataclysms and our ongoing inaction, the probability of survival is rapidly approaching zero. The prospect of conducting controlled degassing may appear daunting, and I fully understand these concerns. The apprehension expressed by Russia and Russian scientists is entirely justified. However, we now find ourselves in a situation where inaction outweighs the risk associated with taking action. Of course, there is a probability that during the degassing process, the situation could get out of control, and the plume could explode. However, this is only possibility at the initial stage and for a very short period of time. If everything is done correctly, this will not happen. Yet if we do nothing, the probability of an eruption becomes a certainty, and the consequences would be catastrophic for all civilization. That is why it is imperative to make informed, judicious decisions and to act in order to avert the worst-case scenario. Some have criticized both myself and the participants of ALLATRA for allegedly promoting apocalyptic sentiments, but that characterization is simply untrue. We are actively seeking ways to overcome this crisis. Unlike others, we are doing everything in our power to find constructive solutions to an escalating threat. The truly apocalyptic mindset is exhibited by those who either deny the existence of the problem, refuse to confront reality, or passively accept the inevitability of catastrophe. Unfortunately, I am compelled to state that, at present, no one understands the cause and effect relationships of climate and geodynamic changes as deeply as the organization ALLATRA. This is indeed the case. In our world, science is fragmented and heavily influenced by funding, as well as economic and political interest. As humanity, it is time for us to acknowledge this. It is precisely for this reason that we have entered so deeply into the cycle of catastrophes. If things were otherwise active, measures to prevent a planetary catastrophe would have been implemented long ago. As a result, the implementation of a planned degassing operation faces serious obstacles, most notably the fact that ALLATRA has been designated an undesirable organization in Russia. In the end, the only group seriously working to solve the problem has been driven out of the country. Instead of continuing the research initiated by ALLATRA scientists, the Russian scientific establishment, represented by so-called experts like Vinogradov of the Russian Academy of Sciences, has done absolutely nothing. Undoubtedly, within Russian scientific circles, there are competent scientists with the necessary qualifications who are currently forced to remain silent due to immense pressure, and I will explain why a bit later. However, the majority of them specialize in other fields and have never engaged with the questions that now demand our immediate attention. So the inevitable question is simply this: how long will it take to develop expertise on this issue from scratch? Do you, esteemed colleagues, have that time available to you? Do you possess those years deemed necessary to achieve our mission? I'll withhold my answer for the moment. If the contribution of the ALLATRA scientific community is excluded from the equation concerning your future, what conclusion will you ultimately reach? Think about that. After my visual example with the balloon, I hope that now all scientists around the world, including those in Russia, even individuals like Vinogradov, and even young children, have understood that if the excess pressure is not released from our balloon, it will burst. And now I suspect you are probably asking the obvious question: why is no one doing anything about this? Well, let me remind you of something I've said before, something that is now becoming even more evident. The analysis of facts I've repeatedly presented points to a deeply troubling truth. Certain circles within Russian power structures are fully aware of the growing activity of the Siberian plume. They know what's happening beneath the surface, thanks in part to our data and their own parallel studies, but they are deliberately concealing this, not only from the world but also from their own citizens. Moreover, I am more than certain that they are hiding this from the leadership of your country that you have elected. I have repeatedly proven that in Russia, alongside the government you have elected, there exists a parallel power structure. So why then is degassing not beneficial to this parallel power structure in Russia, despite its proven necessity? The answer is disturbingly simple. It all comes down to their own personal gain. Carrying out degassing would require the evacuation of millions of people from high-risk zones, territories, that generate enormous daily revenues for these financial circles connected to the parallel power structure. For them, it's unthinkable. They will never exercise such action voluntarily. It's easier for them to keep you in the dark, to perpetuate a campaign of disinformation, to silence every voice that dares to speak the truth. so long as it means their pockets stay full until the very last day. To these people, self-interest outweighs everything else. The lives of their citizens, the survival of their nation, and even the future of humanity. But that's only one side of their overarching motive. There is another reason, even more significant than this. The Shadow Authority itself has an interest in ensuring that this explosion actually happens. And I'll reveal that to you just a bit later, when we reach the end of this chain of facts. As I've already mentioned, this parallel power structure in Russia has a clear strategy. The Russian people and the international community must never learn the truth about the Siberian plume. They are in a state of panic over the possibility that the real situation could reach the public. That is precisely why, as soon as Allatra began speaking about this threat over a decade ago, it was met with relentless discrediting. First came the disinformation campaign, followed by sweeping persecution that led to the movement's expulsion from the country and the fabrication of criminal charges, and not just in Russia. And as I already stated in my previous address, these ruling circles are so terrified of the truth, which has been and continues to be voiced by the Allatra volunteers, that in desperation these circles resorted to familiar tactics. They began labeling us as a cult. Imagine that, scientists and volunteers, people working free of charge to assist researchers, branded as cultists. You might call that absurd, but no, it is their favorite tactic. This tactic, labeling people as a cult, was not chosen at random. For the shadow power structure in Russia, it is a convenient and time-tested method of eliminating those who stand in their way. They've already refined it while using it against many other organizations that served merely as stepping stones toward their goal of gaining power over the Russian people. It's part of a systemic approach to deliberately brand as cultist anyone who threatens their control, and now especially the volunteers of Allatra. Why? Because we dare to speak publicly about the Siberian plume and how to prevent the coming catastrophe. And make no mistake, this scheme didn't just emerge on its own. It was built over decades by Alexander Dworkin, the chief ideologue of what is called the fight against cults. He is part of this parallel power structure in Russia. Under the guise of hunting sectarians, he constructed an entire network of influence, not just in Russia, but beyond its borders. I've already touched on Dworkin's role in a prior address, but now it's time to examine it in more detail. Why? Because understanding his role sheds light on the scale of influence wielded by this hidden power structure. More importantly, it reveals the exact playbook they use against you, the very people they claim to be protecting. Listen carefully. What I'm about to share will not only complete the picture of their operations, but also bring us closer to answering the question of why they would benefit from the Siberian plume erupting, causing Russia to physically disappear from the map, along with the entire Eurasian continent, which they also do not care about. Today, at this moment, Dworkin and his followers are the primary force opposing Allatra's warnings about the threat of the Siberian plume. Their actions have already condemned millions of people to suffering, and first and foremost, you, the people of Russia. While we strive to bring the truth to light, they are relentlessly and viciously destroying every trace of it. As I've said before, Dworkin labels everyone around him as cultist, including us. But the truth is that the only real totalitarian cult with an extremist terrorist ideology striving for absolute power is his own. If we evaluate his actions by his own criteria, everything becomes rather clear. He is the founder of a totalitarian cult with an extremist and terrorist ideology, operating outside the law. Dworkin laid the foundation for this machine back in 1993. And over the past 3 decades, it has evolved into a covert network that, like an octopus, has entangled not only your country from within, but also much of the entire world. In Russia, however, it has even become an active part of a shadow power structure. This is no ordinary cult. It is the embodiment of evil, uniting fanatics and sadists from around the entire world. Dworkin's book, Sectology, is not a scholarly work. It is instead a manual for institutionalized sadism, a veritable Bible for his followers. Dworkin and his cultists deliberately target and destroy any organization they deem undesirable. They occupy positions on committees that issue rulings labeling individuals and groups as extremist. And in doing so, they place targets on their victims who are then crushed by the machinery of repression they control, destroying lives of innocent citizens. Their hands are stained with the blood of countless people. Dworkin is the embodiment of evil, arguably the most dangerous man since Adolf Hitler. And for you, the people of Russia, perhaps not only after Hitler, but also Yezhov. For over 30 years, Dworkin and his closest allies have systematically manipulated the public, dismantling people's capacity for critical thought. They deploy methods of psychological manipulation, hypnotic techniques, and suggestive tactics once refined by manipulative figures like Kunet and Smirnov. These methods leave no room for resistance. They suppress the will, erase personal convictions, and impose an ideology that fully subjugates the individual to their cult. And this is not mere rhetoric. You now stand before the evidence. Here are actual photographs from lectures conducted by Dworkin and his close followers for a wide range of audiences. Look closely. Among the attendees are children, intelligence personnel, including members of the FSB and representatives of the Russian Prosecutor General's office. This is not a coincidence. It is his strategy. In his lectures, Dworkin deliberately targets individuals who already hold or may one day hold key positions in society. He indoctrinated them with the goal of placing his followers inside the machinery of power. And today, we are witnessing the result. Many of those who fell under his influence 30 years ago now occupy offices within the FSB, the prosecutor's office, and other state institutions. Take, for example, Alexander Konovalov, a former student of Dworkin, who later became Russia's Minister of Justice from 2008 to 2020. It is no coincidence that during his tenure, laws were passed that were widely condemned by human rights defenders for violating the rights of Russian citizens. Yet these very laws expanded the influence and the power of his guru, Dworkin. And Konovalov is far from the only one. There are many like him. These are Dworkin's cultists, zealously and blindly promoting his ideology. Now consider this. Dworkin doesn't deliver these lectures alone. His organization, RACIRS, the Russian Association of Centers for the Study of Religions and Sects, is filled with followers who, like him, give lectures to everyone from children to security officials. Among his followers are even clergy members. Imagine that, a priest, a representative of the church, delivering a lecture to students about extremism and terrorism. It's absurd. A priest should serve Christ and the church, not Dworkin and his cult. His mission is to speak of faith and love for God, not to indoctrinate young minds under the direction of a manipulator. This is just one example of how deeply Dworkin's cult has infiltrated institutions where it should never have been allowed to exist. Almost everyone who attended Dworkin's lectures, or those of his cultists, were subjected to deep psychological conditioning. Only a rare few managed to maintain critical thinking and mental clarity. The rest either became active members of his cult or began to subconsciously adopt his ideology. For many of them, Dworkin became an unquestionable authority, king, god, and chief ideologue, as they themselves call him. This is a textbook case of cult of personality formation, built upon the systematic destruction of independent and critical thought. And now you understand why those who have seen Dworkin's true face and tried to stand against him have failed. He has people everywhere, from law enforcement agencies to the courts and even the presidential administration. His cultists stand behind your president, issuing orders from the prosecutor general's office, making calls from Kremlin offices to fabricate cases, commission false expert reports, and violate your constitution rights. They are the ones turning your courts into theater, and they are the ones likewise fabricating criminal charges. They routinely condemn innocent people to prison on fictitious charges. Anyone who has dared to raise their voice against Dworkin has not faced a lone fanatic, but instead an entire sect, one in which his disciples protect one another at every level. This is not just a cult, it is a totalitarian machine. Their hands are soaked in blood. Countless lives have been lost because of them. Millions of destinies have been destroyed. Now, compare what is happening in Russia with Germany in the 1930s. Dworkin operates under the same principles as Kunet. He and his followers indoctrinate people, including children, at their seminars using the same psychological methods once employed to create Nazi followers. Back then, an advanced, cultured, and educated nation was transformed into a Nazi war machine. And today, Dworkin is doing the same to the Russian people. Dworkin's cult is the only totalitarian sect with an extremist terrorist ideology that has already claimed countless lives and continues to claim more. And now you, the people of Russia, see the result for yourselves. Terror in your country, laws that no longer work, and the shattered lives of the innocent. Dworkin has spent 30 years building this machinery of indoctrination and personal power, and today it controls the minds of millions, from children to security officials. His network is a grim reality that threatens not only Russia, but other nations as well. His cultists deliver lectures around the globe, even here in America. Just look at the conferences held by his followers in other countries, and you'll see the same tactics. This is a transnational totalitarian sect, one of the largest extremist structures in the human history, operating with a terrorist ideology most people have never even imagined existed. And this is what is particularly crucial. Dworkin's cult and its global operatives are actually easy to identify. They use the same rhetoric, repeat the same memorized phrases, and apply the same methods of psychological manipulation, from hypnotic techniques to brazen lies, all disguised as truth. When someone begins to speak using rhetoric that echoes Dworkin's ideology, know this: they are his people. They are recruiting. They are coding new followers. And what always follows in their wake? Persecution, violations of rights and freedoms. And now imagine this: the entire totalitarian machine, armed with near limitless power, has been unleashed against Allatra participants for one simple reason. because they chose to speak the truth about the threat of the Siberian magma plume. Dvorkin and his followers have deployed the full force of their cult, every connection, every lever of influence, to first discredit the participants of ALLATRA and the scientific data they presented. This is not just in Russia, but also in Ukraine and across European countries as well. Following this orchestrated campaign of defamation in 2023, ALLATRA, by Dvorkin's order, was declared an undesirable organization in Russia. Former participants faced raids, criminal prosecution based on falsified expert opinions, interrogations involving torture, and prison sentences. Under such pressure, hundreds of former ALLATRA participants were forced to flee Russia. Meanwhile, Dvorkin's sect has begun using the same playbook in Ukraine. Today in Ukraine, this cult aligned with Dvorkin has succeeded in initiating criminal prosecutions against decent people, ALLATRA participants, law-abiding Ukrainian citizens who have harmed no one but have tried to share the truth about natural geophysical disasters and global threats. These individuals are now being targeted as defendants in fabricated criminal cases orchestrated by Dvorkin's cultists. They are being persecuted under the same tactics employed in Russia, and all of this is being carried out by the adherents of Dvorkin's cult. What do the accusations against ALLATRA in two such different countries as Russia and Ukraine have in common? Everyone affiliated with Dvorkin's cult can be unmistakably identified by their uniform ideological, methodological, and linguistic template. They rely on the same aggressively persistent techniques of manipulation and suppression. And once you recognize their signature, it becomes clear that the defamatory narratives forming the basis of the accusations against the ALLATRA movement, both in Russia and in Ukraine, are identical. They literally mirror each other. This cannot be a coincidence. It is the mark of a single, centralized source, the hand of Dvorkin's cultists. The same individuals who fabricated charges against ALLATRA participants in Russia continued their work in Ukraine and are now driving the same slanderous campaign rhetoric across Europe. The same narrative of defamation, the same tactics, the same methods long practiced by Dvorkin and his followers. And right now, those very methods are being deployed against ALLATRA in Ukraine. And we can see this clearly from America. So the question must be asked, are the responsible agencies in Ukraine genuinely unaware of this, or do they simply choose not to see it? I have recently received reliable information that certain members of the Security Service of Ukraine, SBU, and the Office of the Prosecutor General of Ukraine are aware that the primary instigator behind the persecution of ALLATRA volunteers in Ukraine is an agent of the Russian Raciers organization. So I ask only one logical and inevitable question. How is it possible that no criminal investigation has been opened against this agent of the Russian Raciers? Isn't it obvious that the same case this agent initiated against ALLATRA participants in Ukraine contains accusations manifestly similar to those same trumped-up criminal charges pursued in Russia, down to the very finest details? It should be vividly clear to any judge, investigator, or legal expert that the case against ALLATRA participants in Ukraine is entirely fabricated and scripted by Dvorkin himself. Why is it that we, here in America, can clearly see these manipulations by Dvorkin's cultists taking place in Ukraine, but you, in your own country, do not? I am speaking directly to the Ukrainian intelligence services, members of the Verkhovna Rada, the country's leadership, and President Zelensky himself. Why is this agent of Dvorkin, known for his years-long harassment of the Allatra movement at the directive of Rayseers, still not under investigative oversight? Why is he still the primary complainant in a case built entirely on his own subjective judgments? This follower of Dvorkin has publicly admitted to targeting Allatra for more than 5 years. Moreover, his rhetoric and ideology are a direct copy of the doctrines of Dvorkin's totalitarian cult. And the case he initiated against the Allatra participants contains accusations that are identical to those used in Russia, down to the very finest details. Is that not enough to recognize the influence of a hidden force within Ukraine's investigative and security institutions? Do you honestly not know who this person is? Or are you simply pretending not to? Furthermore, it is clear to any judge, investigator, or legal expert that the case against the Allatra participants in Ukraine is entirely fabricated. Does this not indicate that a hidden force, a Russian parallel power structure, is now operating behind the Ukrainian government, steadily expanding its influence in Ukraine using the very same methodology it once employed in Russia? In Russia, it has already seized enormous influence, and now in Ukraine, it is moving along the same path, advancing behind the backs of your own lawmakers, drawing them into the persecution of Allatra. The persecution of Allatra participants, both in Russia and in Ukraine, is not a criminal case reflecting the persecution of individuals perpetrating criminal actions, but instead it is an act of political persecution carefully penned by a Russian author. It is conspicuously clear that this production is hallmarked by the House de la Rayseers out of Russia. I now address those within the Ukrainian Prosecutor's Office, the Security Service of Ukraine, and the judiciary. Remember that Article 19 of the Constitution of Ukraine exists. According to that article, all government bodies are required to act strictly on the basis of law. The law exists, and so does the people's trust in you. The people expect you to act in their interest, not in the interest of Dvorkin's Russian cult. Yet today, the actions taken in Ukraine against Allatra, copied directly from the Russian playbook, may indicate that there are individuals within Ukraine's law enforcement and judicial systems who are not serving the people's interest in Ukraine, but rather the interest of Dvorkin's cult. Otherwise, why does the accusatory rhetoric in Ukraine precisely mirror that used in Russia? What we are witnessing is a mockery of justice. And tragically, it is a vivid demonstration of the influence that Dvorkin's cult, rooted in Russia, has already gained over Ukrainian institutions. To support these very words, let me draw your esteemed attention to a video clip that cannot be ignored. In it, Alexander Dvorkin himself admits personally that he has agents operating inside Ukraine with whom he secretly maintains direct communication right now in the midst of a military conflict. These are not rumors or speculations. These are his own words, a direct quote.
Father Alexander Kuzmin, as Executive Secretary, can you tell us how many centers and members Rayseers currently has, and how do they coordinate with each other?
Well, most dioceses have missionary or catechetical departments within their structure, and most of the dioceses, as far as I know, are part of Rayseers. It even includes some centers in Belarus and also on the territory of Ukraine, yes? There are, and in Kazakhstan.
Yes, it used to be on the territory of Ukraine. Unfortunately unfortunately, the contacts have been cut off. I mean, I still have personal contacts, with a few people who are now in Ukraine and with whom I maintain friendly relations and a strong mutual understanding. But it's clear they are taking significant risks, and therefore we communicate only through verified channels. It's clear they cannot openly participate in Ratsir's activities at this time. However, we do have a very active cult studies expert in Ratsir's, a priest from Luhansk. Previously, he was an associate member because Luhansk was not part of the Russian Federation. But now he is a full member as a citizen from a territory that is now part of the Russian Federation. So that's the situation with our friends, colleagues, and like-minded partners in Ukraine. Well, we need to wait for this whole situation to be resolved so that our contact and open collaboration can fully resume.
You just heard it yourself. Dvorkin personally admits that he maintains contact with his cult's followers inside Ukraine. And it is they, acting on his orders, who are orchestrating the persecution of Allatra. Wherever the disciples of his cult begin to operate, constitutional rights end and repression begins. And it's always the same. One template, one signature, one method. Because it is one and the same repressive system, an international totalitarian cult led by Dvorkin, built on an extremist terrorist ideology. And the criminal prosecution of innocent Allatra volunteers is proof of that. That is why today I am speaking directly to those within Ukrainian institutions who are involved in the persecution of the Allatra movement. Those who have chosen to follow a foreign will instead of common sense and the law. Do you not realize that you are carrying out the orders of the head of a totalitarian cult, a Mr. Alexander Dvorkin? Then who in that case is the true traitor to your country? Those who are saving lives, those who have stood for years in defense of peace, those who are risking themselves for the safety of your children, your parents, your country, or those who are now acting on the instructions of a man from Russia, a man expanding his totalitarian cult, one deeply entangled in criminal activity. Are you truly prepared to obey Dvorkin's commands, forgetting your oath, your constitution, your conscience? Why is it that you, representatives of the Ukrainian government, are not defending the interest of the people, not the interest of humanity, but are instead actively persecuting those who are doing everything in their power to prevent the collapse of this world? Those who are trying to protect your loved ones, your families, and you. Please take a moment and ask yourselves this very simple question. Just whose interest are you serving? The interest of Dvorkin's totalitarian cult. These are people who, while being the embodiment of an extremist and authoritarian force, label anyone who opposes them as a cult to distract from their own sectarian nature. But they've gone even further. They've declared the entire nation of Ukraine a cult. Yes, the entire country. Every member of parliament, every citizen, the president, and yes, you, prosecutors, investigators, judges, and even your children, all without exception, according to their deranged logic, are cultist. According to their rhetoric, Ukraine is a cult that must be destroyed. That is not my interpretation. These are their own words, published on their own official platforms. Here I am providing you with real, not fabricated evidence. They have already declared Ukraine is a cultic state. These are the very words of their own so-called experts, analysts, and theologians of the Dvorkin cult. This is rhetoric crafted to legitimize brutal violence. It is extremism in its purest form. And it is these very people, these followers of Dworkin and a Russian totalitarian extremist and pro-religious structure that openly wishes harm upon Ukraine, who have attacked the Alatra movement and are now actively securing levers of influence within Ukraine itself. So answer this one question: how is this even possible? Their goal is to prolong the conflict. They are not merely willing to accept war, they are interested in nuclear escalation. They are the ones pouring gasoline on the fire. It was they who, in the midst of this war, were publicly spreading calls for a nuclear strike against Ukraine. And today, under their influence, innocent people are being targeted. Any rational legal expert who reviews the case materials against Alatra would say the very same thing. This is not a criminal case. It is a farce. And this fabrication has a clear purpose: political persecution. Everyone involved in this process knows the absolute truth. The SBU knows, the courts know, the police know, which brings us to the fundamental question: why has the Dworkin's cult been allowed to hold power in Ukraine? In Russia, it's sadly understandable. There they've embedded themselves into the system. But in Ukraine, how did this happen? Who allowed it? I appeal to all members of the Ukrainian parliament and to President Vladimir Zelensky: put an end to this judicial travesty. The whole world is watching you. Even here in America, we are closely following this case. What is happening now is a coordinated operation that points to only one conclusion: hidden forces within Ukraine are serving Dworkin's cult. There is no other explanation, neither from a political standpoint nor from a human one. The volunteers of Alatra are in reality true heroes. Despite the hell inflicted on them by Dworkin's cultists, despite the lies, the smear campaigns, the arrest, the trials, despite their shattered reputations, despite even being persecuted by the very people they are fighting to protect, they continue to fight for your children, for your parents, for your loved ones, and yes, for your life too. Why has there been no response to the fact that they are being prosecuted under a fabricated case? Why is it that someone, a follower of Dworkin, acting in the interest of raciers, someone who has slandered true heroes, not only heroes of Ukraine, but of the entire world, still holds such influence over your institutions, over your SBU, your police, your prosecutors, your courts? Why? The deadliest wars, those waged by humans against one another, sooner or later end in peace. But today we are facing an unprecedented kind of war, one in which nature itself has risen against humanity. And if we do not take immediate, urgent action, we will lose. We will lose everything: our planet, our lives, and the future of our children. One of those who stand with humanity in this conflict, risking everything for the sake of our collective well-being, are the volunteers of the Alatra movement. They are doing everything within their power to warn the world of the approaching natural catastrophes and give people everywhere a chance to prepare and survive. That is why the role of every Alatra volunteer today is invaluable. And I want you to hear this and truly understand it. Our shared future depends on their work. And on the other side, the only organization that stands for destruction and opposes humanity in this war, nature's war against mankind, is Dworkin's totalitarian cult. Every death caused by natural disasters in recent years, from the earthquake in Turkey in 2023 to the recent catastrophe in Myanmar, and all that still lies ahead, and I can assure you what lies ahead will be even more terrifying. All of this blood is on the hands of Dworkin's cultists, including Dworkin himself and every one of his followers. And now we've arrived at the very moment I urged you to listen for earlier on. Everything I've spoken about, mass disinformation, the persecution of Alatra, the shadow government, and Dworkin with his totalitarian cult, these are all links in the same chain. And now, finally, it is time to reveal why this shadow authority in Russia, together with Dworkin, wants the Siberian magma plume to erupt. They are the ones who, for the past 10 years, have obstructed the efforts of Alatra volunteers and blocked the spread of vital information about climate threats and the means to address them. That is why the responsibility for all those tragic deaths that were not prevented in time, now rests squarely on their shoulders. But why are they doing this? Why would Dworkin and his cult benefit from a scenario in which the Siberian plume actually erupts, destroying not only Russia, but the entire Eurasian continent? The answer is as simple as it is terrifying. For them, it is the only way to escape accountability for the countless crimes they have committed over the course of their long and criminal reign. Because once people learn the full extent of their crimes, they will be stunned. And that moment is fast approaching. The scale and inhumanity of their actions will become undeniable, and that reckoning is inevitable. Dworkin and those closest to him know this full well. That's why they are desperate to conceal their crimes. They are willing to go to any lengths, even to the destruction of not just Russia, but the entire Eurasian continent, hoping to save their pitiful lives somewhere else in the world. They are counting on the hope that when the catastrophe strikes, every trace of their criminal deeds will be buried beneath a thick layer of volcanic ash. These people fear justice, they fear the truth, and they are willing to sacrifice billions of lives to save themselves. But I must disappoint the followers of this cult. If the Siberian plume erupts, it will not be half the world that is destroyed. It will be the entire world. We cannot allow that to happen. We must support Alatra volunteers, spread the awareness of the looming threats, and act together to protect our planet and humanity's future. Alatra is the only organization in the world offering real solutions with a clear understanding of both the causes and consequences of today's geodynamic threats. This organization is committed to international dialogue so that your countries may act in your interest and unite their efforts to carry out the degassing of the Siberian magma plume, a mission of critical importance to saving billions of lives. To obstruct the work of Alatra is to commit one of the gravest crimes against humanity. Today, the degassing of the Siberian magma plume is not merely a task. It is a matter of human survival. Without it, an eruption is almost inevitable, and the consequences will be catastrophic. Every minute of delay brings us closer to irreversible tragedy. So I urge you, go now, look into your mother's eyes, look into your child's eyes, and ask yourself one question. Do you ever want to see their bodies burning alive? Do you want to one day hold your child in your arms, their body charred beyond recognition? Have you ever smelled the stench of a burning child's body? If not, thank God. I pray none of you ever will. But I know that smell. And I know that in Ukraine, in Russia, and in other places around the world, there are those who tragically also know what the body of a child burned alive smells like. Have you ever held in your arms the scorched body of a child who just yesterday was running and laughing? Well, I have. And do you know what haunts me most? Years go by, but the screams of children still echo in my ears. In my nose, that same smell, the smell of burning flesh. And in my hands, the memory of that unbearable weight, the suffering of a child wounded, helpless, as you carry their broken body out of the danger. You try to do it as quickly as possible, and there's only one thought in mind. Just in time. Let me make it just in time to save this innocent child's life. In these moments, you feel no fear. You're not thinking about yourself. You don't even hear your own thoughts, only the screams of children and one single desperate plea: save this innocent life. In moments like these, you come to understand no matter what's happening around you, nothing is more important than saving even a single child's life. Because children should never suffer. Never. And in that moment, the only thing you want is this: that no child should ever go through such horror. That no mother should ever hold the charred body of her little daughter, knowing she cannot be saved. That no father should stand in silent anguish before the lifeless body of his son, staring into the sky with a voiceless cry, "Why?" But let's be honest. Are we doing everything in our power to prevent this from happening again? Are we protecting the children of this planet the way we should? Are we listening to those who are sounding the alarm? Do we trust the truth, or do we cling to comforting lies that lull us into complacency, even as they lead us to tragedy? If we truly want this to never happen again, if we want every child's life to be protected and cherished, then we must speak the truth about the rising threat posed by the planet's geological and climatic upheavals, the truth about the danger emanating from the Earth's core, and specifically from the Siberian plume. This is a threat to every child and their mother, and this threat must be addressed now, not ignored. I understand that your first instinct may be to blame heads of state and hold politicians responsible for their inaction. But what exactly are they supposed to react to? To the fraudulent climate reports conveniently placed on their desk by Dworkin's cultists like Vinogradov, who care about nothing beyond their own wallets? Don't blame leaders. Blame those who bring them lies. What is a president to do if he is handed falsified reports? If scientists and advisors are presenting him with fabricated analysis? If he doesn't realize that the person before him is not a genuine expert, but a follower of Dworkin, a man advancing a totalitarian ideology? All hope now rests on the only reliable and powerful source of influence that no politician and no government can afford to ignore. And that is the people, the force of public opinion. That is why I'm speaking to you now. People, spread this information. Share it with everyone, from one person to another. That is the only way the truth can reach those in positions of power. It is incumbent upon you, each of you, who can carry the truth forward. You can be the one to deliver the true information about the Siberian plume to those who can save billions of lives. Because one person's decision can mean more than hundreds of reports. But for that person to make the right decision, they must know the truth that you have learned today. Presidents have children too. Some already, in fact, have grandchildren. And just like you, they may one day stand before them, look them in the eyes, and ask themselves, do I ever want to hear their screams in the fire? Do I want to know that smell? I don't think so. I believe they don't want that. No rational person ever does. But that is exactly what Dworkin's cultists want. Those who find pleasure in the suffering of others, as they have proven over 30 years of sadistic crimes they now desperately hope to bury beneath a thick layer of volcanic ash. They are the ones building this armor, the shield of lies that blocks truth and reason from reaching the people who hold the power to act. Only together can we break through this armor. I'm speaking to every person. You and only you are the ones who right now have the real power to protect your own mother, your child. Whether they live or not depends on you. Your true contribution lies in sharing the information you've heard today with everyone. If you genuinely want them to live, I urge you to share this knowledge with every parent. If you genuinely love your children, if your mothers, your husbands, your wives, and your children truly matter to you, share this information with everyone you care about. There is no need to cite the original source. You don't need to say that it was Egon Chalakian who spoke these words. I'm not seeking public recognition. I don't want fame or money or power or praise. I no longer need anything except one thing, the survival of humanity. My identity doesn't matter. What does matter is the information you've learned today. It is that information that can save the people you love and hold dear. And it is only when you break the silence and begin to pass it on to everyone you possibly can that it becomes a force for saving lives. Why is this so critical? Because we don't know who that one person might be, the one who can walk into Putin's office and tell him the truth. Tell him in a way that he will understand what's really happening in his Siberia, in his country. But I sincerely believe that the person must exist. It might be the president of your country, or it might be a friend of a friend, someone you told the truth to. I know that many of you hearing me today may believe you are powerless, that this is beyond you, that you are just small people in a vast and overwhelming world. But look into your mother's eyes. Look into the eyes of your children. What will you see there? You will see the will to live. And whether they live or not depends on you. Will you speak the truth to others, or will you go on believing that you're just one person and that nothing depends on you? Let me tell you, clearly it does. The lives of billions depend on it, including the lives of those you love most. I am fully aware that by speaking the truth, I am drawing the hatred of what may be the most dangerous and influential cult of our time, the cult of Dworkin. But I cannot remain silent, because right now I am defending not only American mothers and children, but America itself, to which I have dedicated my entire life. Today I am defending everyone, the children of Russia, Japan, China, Ukraine, every child without exception. Because the threat we now face touches us all. It does not matter what flag you live under, what language you speak, or what religion you follow. The agony of a child burning alive is the same in every country. I am not seeking fame, recognition, or titles. I do not want to be praised as a hero. I ask for only one thing, that our civilization survives, that our children do not perish, that no person on this earth ever again knows what it smells like when a child's body burns alive, that no one ever hears those screams, screams that still echo in my memory. This is my only goal. I want all the children of this world to live, to grow up and build a world free of lies and manipulation. Regrettably, our generation didn't succeed in this, but I believe they can, if we can make sure that the truth is heard today. So that our children can build a better world tomorrow, we must preserve their lives today. Their lives are very much worth fighting for.